Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 97 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm good, man. How about you?
I'm doing great.
Yeah? What number episode?
97.
97, man.
So we got, 3 episodes till the Big Daddy 100.
Well, if you're doing the math correctly.
We get the chairs, the new chairs. By then, we'll have them for. I'm trying to time it so that they're here. That's the first episode that we'll have them. We got something special planned for episode 100, but might have something special to tie into it over the next couple episodes. I'm playing around.
Really?
I got an idea, though, that I think people will like. We got some Patreon shout-outs, so let's do those. We had Lottie Vist.
Hey, Lottie.
I hope I'm saying that right. I know she's from, I believe, over somewhere in Scandinavia. I can't remember which country. Tony McCall, David Byers, William, Andrea Holder, Dark Poutine Podcast.
Poutine.
Yep. True Crime Podcast. If you haven't listened to it, check it out. Gibbs, you and I met Mike Brown at CrimeCon. It's a cool guy. It's a good podcast. You should check it out.
Definitely check it out.
Anna Walgren, Mary Osborne, Joe Wong, Janet Palmer, Marion Jacobson, Lucy Burton, Michelle Giacomo. Always wanted me a Camaro.
Yeah.
Jerry Kennett, Callie Leavitt, Colin Butcher, Clooney Finner.
Clooney Finner, man. What a name.
George Clooney Finner.
It's like an Irish name.
You think?
Clooney Finner. Or it's a law firm. Clooney Finner.
Clooney Finner, but there's only 2 names. Usually would have at least a third. True. Amanda Bitches Gillian.
What's up, bitches?
And she put it in parentheses. I'm pretty sure she wanted me to say it, so I'm saying it.
Yeah.
George Montovanos.
Yep.
I like that name.
It's a strong name.
Reminds me of Ricardo Montalban. From one of my favorite shows as a kid, Fantasy Island.
Deep plane.
Loved that show. You never knew what was going to happen on that show.
No.
Because it was fantasy.
That's right. Saw it right after the Love Boat.
We had Just Josh.
Yeah, JJ.
And I think that's an homage to you, Gibbs. He put the word just in front of his name.
Yeah.
Because he knew you were going to say it anyway.
Well, he's right.
Cora Fritzinger, April Monty, Cassie Savage, Adam Binkley, Melissa.
Just Melissa.
Andrea.
Another just Andrea?
Just Andrea.
We'll put them all together, man.
Katie Hauk.
Maybe we do matchmaking.
Chris Stevens.
Hey, Chris.
Sunday Austin. It's a cool name.
Yeah, I like that. Sunday Austin.
Yep. I've known one other person in my life named Sunday.
Was it Saturday?
No.
Monday?
Nope.
Any day of the week?
It was Sunday.
I know.
Ryan Heathman. Ashley Tolliver Jones.
Ooh, Tolliver Jones.
And Cindy Barrett.
Hey, Cindy Barrett.
So, appreciate that. Appreciate all the new Patreon support. And if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Jennifer Rogers.
Hey, Jennifer.
Been a Patreon supporter for a very long time, and we appreciate that.
Been around a long time. Been around a long time.
Yeah. I bet you she appreciates that, too.
Yeah.
We appreciate all the people that support us, the new folks, the ones that continue to support us. We had some great PayPal support as well.
I should have sung that.
You should have. People are always wanting you to sing.
I'm holding back.
We had Jillian Pockrun. Allison Harper.
Hey, Allison.
Stefan Blazajovsky.
Oh, Blazajovsky.
Mike Hobart.
Hey, Mike.
And Claude Archie.
Hey, say it again.
Claude Archie.
Hey, Claude.
Claude.
Hey, Claude.
Claude.
Claude. Hey, Claude Archie.
You were trying to get the Archie in there too quick.
I know.
It went Claude on you.
Made its own little name.
So, Gibbs, we got to do this. We did this on the Patreon episode that we put out yesterday. which is a good episode. It's on Lisa Nowak, and this is the astronaut love triangle.
Yeah. Diaper-wearing astronaut.
Diaper-wearing astronaut.
Drove across town. Well, more across town.
I was going to say, almost cross-country. To confront her arch rival.
Yeah.
But on the Patreon episode, we did this, and I want to do it again. So I got an email about how you can improve your Australian accent. So say these words for me like I say them.
Okay.
Rise up lights.
Rise up lights.
So it sounds like you're saying razor blades in Australian with an Australian accent.
Rise up lights.
It does.
Rise up light. Oh yeah, yep.
It really does.
Like every time I hear it,
you probably can't hear it as much. But
I forgot when we did it on the Patreon. Rise up lights.
It's a good Australian accent.
About oi, rise up lights.
Yeah, I don't know why anybody would be saying oi razor blades, but hey,
oi, rise up lights.
If you walked into a store in Australia and the guy asked you what you needed,
I'd be like, rise up lights.
Exactly.
There you go.
Now, I do want to mention that our Patreon merch winner for August was Carrie Kowalczyk. So congratulations to Carrie.
Rise up lights.
Razor blades to you. And because we had the Patreon episode, there is no unsolved episode this week.
What?
All right, Gibbs, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time?
I am.
This is one that's been requested quite a bit. We're talking about Drew Peterson.
Yeah.
The other Peterson.
We are.
We did Scott Peterson. Now we're doing Drew Peterson.
Yeah.
Some bad Peterson men.
A lot of Peters, son.
But this is a guy that, he was a police officer. He was married 4 times. And we're going to get into all the specifics, but convicted of murdering his 3rd wife, suspected of murdering his 4th wife. And just the way that the guy carried himself, the way that he did media interviews, a lot of people, based on that alone, Gibbs, they didn't like him. They didn't get a good vibe off of him.
Kind of cocky?
Yeah, kind of cocky, kind of pompous. Thought he was better than everybody else. But we'll see as we go along. Now, Drew Peterson was born on January 5th, 1954, to Donald and Betty Peterson. 3 siblings, and his parents were married for 38 years until the point that his father passed away. And after his father died, his mother married her deceased husband's boss. Now, that doesn't really have anything to do with Drew. I just thought it was an interesting fact. Drew graduated from Willowbrook High School in Villa Park, Illinois. And he was active. He ran cross country. We don't have a lot of information on his childhood. But after graduation, Drew joined the Army and he got married. And like I said, he was married 4 times. But his first marriage was to his high school sweetheart, Carol Brown. They dated in high school. They got married in 1974 and were married for 6 years. But Drew Peterson was a serial cheater. And that's going to become evident as we go through these marriages. And his first marriage ended when Carol found out that he had been unfaithful. They did have 2 children together. Peterson spent 4 years in the Army in total, most of that as a military police officer. And that's going to be good training for him because it would lead to Drew Peterson having a 30-year career as a police officer. He was even awarded a Police Officer of the Year award in 1979. After his marriage to Carol failed, Drew dated a woman briefly for a few months, but she would come out later and say that he abused his position as a police officer to harass her. And this is a claim that is going to be made about Drew Peterson, the police officer, that he did stuff that was not above board. Like he took advantage of his position. Let's put it that way. That's going to come up quite a bit. Peterson married Victoria Connolly in 1982. and they were married for 10 years. They ran a bar together. They each had children from previous marriages that they were raising. Years later, Victoria would tell a paper that Drew Peterson was, quote, a legend in his own mind, which is something, Gibbs, I know has been said about you many times. It's actually fairly accurate.
Really?
You are a legend in your own mind.
I'm not going to respond.
You're not?
Not taking the bait.
You don't believe that?
I am just an average guy, man.
Just average Joe.
Average Joe.
But she would also say that when the marriage was good, it was great. But when it was bad, it was really, really bad.
Well, I think everybody could say the first part, right? I think anybody can say when it's good, it's really good.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
I think you get in trouble in the last part. Right? You can have some bad moments in your marriage, or you can have some real bad moments.
And I think she's referring to the real bad.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, you get some bad, but what you get is great moments, and you get a lot of days ticking by. It's not really great. It's not bad.
Right.
It's good.
Yeah. There's that in-between area.
Yeah. I mean, not every day can be great. Can it?
Well, it probably could be. All depends. You know, you got a lot of factors. You got to throw in kids, right? Kids can...
Those darn kids.
Yeah, kids, work.
Okay, so if you didn't have to work,
yeah,
and you had millions and millions of dollars, would every day be great?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so, too.
Unless you just don't feel good. Wake up, you know. If you have good health, plenty of money...
no adversity in your life.
It would be beautiful, man. You just wake up and go out and hang out by the pool or the beach or the whatever you like to do.
Everything would be shit.
Lay in bed all day and just watch movies.
But she would elaborate on the really bad. You know, she said Peterson over the years became extremely controlling. Now, Gibbs, I'm not sure if this was sleeping with the enemy level of controlling, but Vicky did claim that Drew Peterson bugged the house in order to keep track of her. That's a pretty high level of controlling.
So clocking her time, what she's doing every minute, where she's going, who she's seeing.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. Well, that would get old, I think, with anybody. You know, if you every time you do something, then you got to respond and, you know, to explain why'd you go over here at 7:00 today.
Just the fact that your husband or your significant other feels the need to bug your house, there's no trust there.
No, so just go ahead and get divorced, man. Move on.
But that's not the worst part. She would also say that he was extremely abusive, claimed at one point he threatened to kill her and make it look like an accident. And that's important because of what we are going to talk about down the road with Drew Peterson. Now, during this marriage to Vicky in 1985, Drew was fired from the Bolingbrook police force after he was found guilty of official misconduct, disobedience, and failure to report a bribe. But Peterson appealed his firing, and he was reinstated the very next year in 1986 when a Will County judge overruled the police commission's decision. So I said, Gibbs, there's going to be a lot of question about his ethics as a police officer.
Right.
There's a heap of questions about his ethics as a husband. I said he's a serial cheater. And we know that he was sleeping around while he was married to Vicky Connolly. And the woman that he was seeing behind Vicky's back was a woman by the name of Kathleen Savio. And after his divorce was finalized from Vicky in 1992, Drew and Kathleen married. They would eventually have 2 sons together. But you know, Gibbs, this is not going to be a happily ever after story. For one thing, Drew Peterson cannot be faithful to one woman. He can't keep it in his pants, Gibbs. He just can't do it. I don't know why, but he can't.
It's hard to do, I guess, for him.
For him?
Yeah. I think there's some people are how they are, unfortunately.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that are cheaters that don't have the willpower to say no. And then there's some of us that don't need willpower because there's no temptation. So there's no need for willpower if nobody's tempting you. But while he's married to Kathleen, he begins seeing a woman named Stacy Cales, who was 19 years old. At this point, he's 49 years old. So the 49-year-old Drew Peterson swept 19-year-old Stacy Cales off her feet by lavishing her with attention and gifts and, that sort of thing. There also appears to have been some physical abuse in the marriage to Kathleen. She filed a protective order in 2002 stating that Drew physically abused her. And Drew's son, Steven, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, he would say, years down the road that, he remembered some pretty vicious fights to the point that, the next morning he would wake up and the house would be destroyed. It has been reported that there were 18 calls to police about domestic issues during that relationship between Drew and Kathleen.
Yeah, that's probably a good sign of trouble in the making.
That seems like a pretty high number.
I would think so.
So they were married around 10 years or so. That's almost 2 a year.
Yeah.
I've never had one in my life, and I've been married 20...
That got called.
Some years.
I mean, did they get close to calling?
I don't know.
Did the phone get ripped out of the hand or the wall?
No, I would never do that.
No, I'm talking about Drew.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, not you.
Yeah, so you think the number is probably higher of incidents.
Yeah. Your wife's just too scared, man.
Oh, yeah, she's scared to death.
She sits in that corner that you have for her and just shakes.
Don't get out of the corner.
Don't get out of that corner.
No. But, been married 20-some years, never had to have the cops come out here and separate us.
Wow.
I mean, we've had our share of verbal spats.
Yeah. She win?
Usually.
Yeah.
After I give in, but it takes a while. Yeah. I'm stubborn.
Are you?
Yeah.
You hold the fight. You're like, I know I'm wrong, but I'm not going to stop right now.
I have to hold it as long as I can.
Yeah.
But 18 and 9 or 10 years, Gibbs, it seems like a lot. And like you said, that's a bad sign, right? That's a red flag that something's not going right.
You probably don't have a good relationship. If you got to call the police a couple times a year to come out to your house, you might want to consider finding somebody else.
Yeah. Well, they did divorce in 2003. But again, Drew's been seeing this 19-year-old, and he marries her. He marries Stacy Cales after his divorce is finalized. But even though they were divorced, Drew and Kathleen Savio, they still had to clean up some outstanding financial issues. They had a court date scheduled coming up in a few weeks to clear these up. But Kathleen Savio would never make this court date because on March 1st, 2004, 40-year-old Kathleen Savio was found face down in an empty bathtub at her home in Bolingbrook by some neighbors. She had a massive head wound, and it was said that her hair was soaked with blood. The wound was described as a 1-inch gash to the back of her head. When the autopsy results came out, they stated that Kathleen died of drowning. A forensic pathologist also concluded that her head wound was most likely caused from a fall.
So she slipped in the tub, hit her head, and drowned.
That's what they're saying.
Okay.
Which would mean to me that at some point they thought there was water in the tub, unless they're saying that she drowned in her own blood or something like that. I couldn't actually find that part. But it's part of the mystery that comes out later, right? Why was there no water in the tub when she was found? Other than the fact that this one was in a bathtub, kind of eerily similar, Gibbs, to the Kathleen Peterson case. Kathleen Peterson, Michael Peterson, there's the Peterson name. We did this one on Unsolved. She also had, pretty massive head wound to the back of her head. And it's one of those mysteries of how did that happen? Well, let's put it this way. A lot of people don't think it's a mystery. But in this case, the case of the death of Kathleen Savio, it was mishandled from the very beginning. from Jump Street, 21 Jump Street.
You really liked that, didn't you?
I do. Yeah. I used to watch that show all the time.
Who were you?
That was Johnny Depp, of course.
You sure?
Yeah.
You weren't the other guy?
No. The big guy?
Yeah.
No.
Or the other guy? How about the guy with the dark hair?
You just keep saying the other guy. There was like 4 or 5 guys. I don't know.
Yeah, the Depp.
I know who you're talking about.
And the Greco. Yeah.
Richard Grieco.
Richard. Yeah.
Greco
Romeo.
Sorry. I'm always sorry that I take us down another path. But again, case mishandled. So for one thing, Gibbs, they didn't collect evidence from the bathtub or from Kathleen's body.
Well, that's not good.
Because I think they're going into this thing just automatically assuming she slipped, she fell.
He's a police officer.
That's going to come into it too.
Yeah.
It was said that the death investigator was at the scene for less than 20 minutes. So between 10 and 20 minutes is all he spent even, looking at things. Police were aware of, but they didn't dig deep into Kathleen's repeated claims of domestic abuse. So police knew that, though. They knew, well, they had records of the 18 calls. There's no doubt they knew. And in what is probably some deadly foreshadowing, they interviewed Stacy Peterson, formerly Stacy Kales, now married to Drew, with Drew sitting right next to her. And it was Stacy that provided the alibi for Drew Peterson for that time period around the time that Kathleen Savio died. So a couple of months later, they have a coroner's inquest. And the jury was told that Kathleen Savio had $1 million in life insurance, but the beneficiaries were her 2 sons. So Drew wasn't getting any of that money. But they also learned that Savio was set to get the couple's $300,000 home in the divorce settlement. So there is some monetary motive there. A state police officer testified at this inquest that Drew Peterson could not account for his whereabouts during this period of time leading up to Kathleen's death. But the jury weighed the evidence and they concluded that Kathleen Savio's death was accidental. So Drew Peterson was free and clear, at least for the time being.
Yeah, you got lucky?
Maybe.
We're
going to find out. We know he's not free and clear now, right? Or we wouldn't be talking about him on True Crime all the time. All right, Gibbs, let's take a quick break to talk about our sponsor, Daily Harvest. Everybody's back to school. My kids are back to school. My wife is back to school. They love Daily Harvest because it's something they can grab when they need healthy fuel fast. Daily Harvest delivers perfectly portioned cups of frozen organic fruits and vegetables directly to your door. All you have to do is add water or your favorite milk to your cup, then just blend or heat. They have these new savory Harvest bowls, which are amazing. They make healthy dinners much faster than takeout. And their new plant-based, ready-to-blend protein smoothies are outstanding. Each of their dessert-inspired flavors packs in at least 10 grams of protein. And they don't contain any chalky powders. My favorite right now is the mint chocolate. And I have to hide them back behind a bunch of stuff in the freezer because if I don't, my kids will eat them all. So go to daily-harvest.com, enter our promo code TCAT to get 3 cups free in your first box. That's promo code TCAT for 3 free Daily Harvest cups at daily-harvest.com. daily-harvest.com. So now we're talking about this relationship between Drew and Stacy Peterson. And it started out good. But don't most relationships, Gibbs, start out good?
Always, man.
Or they wouldn't start.
Yeah, there wouldn't be they
wouldn't last very long.
Honeymoon phase.
Yeah. I think his relationships with the other women started out good, but as the marriage to Stacy progressed, she began confiding in friends that she was fearful of Drew. She told friends that he was mentally abusive and that she was planning on ending the marriage just weeks before she disappeared. Not good.
Not good at all.
So his ex-wife has died, and his current wife is missing. It's not a good scenario for anyone. But the last time anyone heard from 23-year-old Stacy Peterson was October 28th, 2007. And very quickly, Gibbs, by the next month, Drew Peterson was named by the Illinois State Police as a suspect in her disappearance. So it didn't take long for him to, be on their radar. Now, of course, he was the husband. He was probably the first one looked at.
Of course, normal policy.
But let's break down a rough timeline of that day. So there was a neighbor, a friend of the Petersons, that while on her way to the grocery at about 9:40 a.m., she saw both of their cars parked in the driveway. So Drew's and Stacy's. About 10:15 a.m., a friend called Stacy to talk about meeting later that day, and they made some plans. Drew would say that he woke up around 11 and noticed that his wife was gone, and he assumed that she had left to go paint a house in a neighboring town. She did do some painting. She did some painting with her sister. I think she was scheduled to paint a house with her sister. At 11:55 a.m., just before noon, that same neighbor from before is coming back from the grocery. And this time sees only Drew's GMC Yukon Denali parked in the driveway. That neighbor tried calling Stacy's cell phone close to 2 p.m. that day. And then you also had Stacy's sister, Cassandra, who tried to call Stacy a bunch of times on her cell phone, but could not reach her. Drew Peterson would state that Stacy called him around 9 p.m. that night and told him that she was leaving him for another man. Around 11 p.m. that night, Cassandra drove to the Peterson house, where one of Drew's kids told her that the pair had a big fight that morning and that neither of them were in the house. They were both gone. So she was extremely worried. She got in touch with the neighbor and had her call Drew Peterson. And the neighbor was able to reach him by phone. The neighbor said that when he answered the phone, he was out of breath, and she could hear him putting his keys in the ignition of the car. But I guess, Gibbs, when she asked him where he was, he said he was at home, that he had been out looking for Stacy, but now he was home. So she wasn't buying it because she could hear what was going on in the background. And Cassandra doesn't give up on this. She drives back out to the Peterson home around 2:30 a.m. the next morning. By this time, both cars are in the driveway. She probably thought that was a good sign.
You would think.
That she's seeing her sister's car in the driveway. She has a male friend with her. So she has this guy call Drew on his cell phone. And the guy asks Drew where Stacy was, and Drew says that she left him. He goes on to say that she took $25,000, took her car to the airport, and then flew out to either Jamaica or the Bahamas. So whatever good feeling she may have had by seeing the car in the driveway, it's now gone. And I think she's getting tired of this.
Well, I would think so. Trying to hunt it down, trying to get some answers.
Everything seems to be BS. Nobody's buying what this guy's saying. And, at some point, she has enough. I think she thought he was full of shit. And she called the Illinois State Police about 4 a.m. to report her sister missing. So I think, Gibbs, as they would in any situation like this, the authorities are searching for Stacy. There's volunteers that come out. They begin helping with the search for Stacy Peterson, but nobody finds anything. In particular, they were searching for a large plastic container that they believed was removed from the home by Peterson and one of his relatives. And this is kind of a very strange thing that comes out pretty quickly. This relative was reportedly hospitalized for a suicide attempt after helping Drew remove this container. Allegedly, the relative told a friend late that night that the container was warm when he touched it, and he was afraid that he had just helped Drew Peterson dispose of Stacy's body.
Wow.
So
that's haunting.
It is haunting. So go back to the timeline. It was reported that Drew picked up this relative around 7 p.m. that night. They went to a coffee shop, and at some point, apparently Drew gave this person, his relative, a cell phone, and he told him, don't answer it. So very strange.
Yeah.
First of all, why are you leaving me at a coffee shop with a cell phone that I'm not supposed to answer?
So setting up an alibi because it's pinging off the towers?
Maybe. But the cell phone rings. And this relative said that the caller ID came up as Stacy. So to your point, Gibbs, could this have been the 9 p.m. call that we referenced in the timeline where Drew said Stacy called him to say she was leaving with another man? Right? So he goes, calls from her cell phone.
Yeah.
And
from a different cell tower.
And yeah, to his own cell phone, proving that she did call him. Now remember, this guy's a cop and has been a cop for a very long time.
So he has some knowledge on how to make
things. He's got a lot of knowledge. Drew supposedly went back to the coffee shop, picked up the relative, and that's when they went to the house to dispose of the container. It was said that the two men went to an upstairs bedroom and removed a large, sealed, 4-foot-long, rectangular plastic container, and they put it in Drew's SUV. Peterson then dropped off this relative around 10 p.m. And I guess, Gibbs, there were neighbors that also reported seeing Drew Peterson and another man hauling out a big container from his house that night. They sent dive teams to search this, it was called the Sanitary and Ship Canal, but they didn't find anything. So in the meantime, Drew Peterson is talking to the press, which I think for a guy like him, I mentioned it up front, I don't think it was a good idea. He doesn't come off very well. He comes off as though he didn't care at all about his wife or the fact that no one could find her. And he wasn't shy about talking to the media. Now, he was gruff, and sometimes he would say, hey, go away.
Right.
But then the next thing you know, it's like he's trying to get in the spotlight. He talked to the local media in Chicago, but also went on national shows as well.
I've talked to you before, so I got kids in the car, you morons. So
we're not shooting the kids.
I'll talk to you another time. Please go home. Thanksgiving's the next couple of days. Please go home. Please leave me alone. Please don't get involved in my little world. Folks, this is the holiday season. I know at least 5 families that are losing their homes that are in this area. You probably should put maybe a little bit of effort into saving these people and their families, or reaching out to your fellow man. If someone needs a shoulder to cry on or they need a meal for their families, you guys should be maybe putting a little more effort into doing that rather than harassing my family. Folks, have a good day.
Were you ever physical with her?
Never.
Never. So those stories are totally untrue.
Correct. I'm a police officer.
Right.
And I don't work for the phone company or the power company. And as a police officer, we don't have the same ability to do things as the common person. If I get involved in a domestic situation where I'm physical with a wife, I'll lose my job. And I would never even care to even come close to risking that. And I kind of challenge anybody out there to find anybody that has ever even seen me mad. So
you don't have a temper?
No.
Are you in love with Stacy?
Very much so.
Think she might be alive?
I do.
So there's some snippets there of encounters that Peterson had with local media in the beginning. And then you hear him on Larry King, talking about that he's never been physical. Well, he did have 18 calls with his previous wife. The one thing that got me was him saying if he was physical with his wife, he would lose his job as a police officer. Well, what happened on those 18 calls? Was it the fact that he was a police officer and they said, oh, well, you're a police officer, so nothing happened?
Yeah, you wonder.
Yeah, I don't know the outcome of those 18, and I don't know whose fault it was, and I don't know any of that. And then Gibbs, what really got me was, you hear him talking to local reporters saying, why are you bothering me? There's 5 people in this neighborhood that have lost their homes. You should be helping them. He didn't say, you should be out looking for my wife or trying to, doesn't that seem like the logical
you would think
thing to say?
Yeah. Why aren't you trying to find my wife?
Right. You're not going to find my wife standing in my front yard.
Right.
Taking pictures of me and my family, but he doesn't say that. And I don't know what to make of that, but I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
And then I have a little bit more I want to play of him talking on Larry King because I think it's important.
Don't know. I don't know. We got information that she drowned in the bathtub. I was working. I was the watch commander at the police department. And the previous night, I believe it was, she failed to respond at the door to allow me to bring the children home. The children were with me for the weekend. That was unusual for her, so I started calling her on the phone, and I started questioning with the neighbors, and they were also alerted because it was unusual for her. I had neighbors go into the house, and they found her dead in the bathtub. For many years, my children and I, we've been, believing that, she died in a household accident. I would imagine that the first autopsy, the fresh one, would be the most accurate, but powers to be are coming up with some new decisions on it, and we won't really know for sure until, we have a chance to go ahead and review that decision.
So a little foreshadowing there, but I wanted to play it because he's talking about his, previous wife that died, his ex-wife, Kathleen Savio, but it rolls in nicely to this. So you have the disappearance of Stacy Peterson, the fact that Drew Peterson is the prime suspect. And I think, Gibbs, that leads authorities to re-examine the events surrounding Kathleen's death. In November 2007, they exhumed the body of Kathleen Savio. Now, they had to wait until February 2008 for the findings to be released, but when they ruled Kathleen's death a homicide. The report noted that Savio died of drowning after being strangled, and it also said that the original photos showed scratches and abrasions that should have been taken into account in the first autopsy. But remember, we talked about it. This was not a well-handled investigation into the death of Kathleen Savio. And actually, I think Michael Bodden, the forensic pathologist, was even involved in this one. Right? We talked about him recently in the case of Lemuel Smith in New York, but I think he was involved in this case as well, in this second autopsy.
In the second one?
Mm-hmm. So it's late 2008. Police are getting close to charging Drew Peterson. And you heard him talk about it at the end of that clip. They're coming out with this second autopsy. Things aren't looking good for him. So what does he do? He gets engaged for a 5th time to a 23-year-old woman.
5 times, man.
And always goes like 30, 40 years younger. I don't get it.
It's crazy, man.
I mean, he wasn't a horrible looking guy, but he wasn't George Clooney.
No.
At all.
No, not at all. I'm just thinking 5 times, man.
5 times, married 4 times, would have probably been married a 5th. But thankfully, this woman's father stepped in and talked some sense into her. I don't know exactly how the conversation went, Gibbs, but as fathers to daughter, to girls ourselves,
right.
I'm assuming it went something like, do you understand what the hell you're doing? Living with a man who is suspected of killing multiple wives.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, what are you thinking, for sure?
I'm assuming it went something like that. But either way, it worked. However the conversation happened, it worked. This woman moved out of the house. She was actually living with him. And it's probably a good thing. Who knows if something would have happened to her. But another thing happened during that time frame as police were closing in. So it's 2008 still. The Illinois General Assembly passed a measure that would quickly become known as Drew's Law. So essentially, it allowed a judge to admit hearsay statements if a prosecutor can prove a defendant may have killed a witness to prevent him or her from testifying. So this is really important because you think about hearsay, right? Most of the time, hearsay evidence, hearsay testimony is not let in. You have to believe this was a preemptive strike by the prosecution, knowing what was about to come, because this measure or law or whatever it was actually put forth by the prosecutor. So my assumption is Gibbs, he knew that he was about ready to bring this case against Peterson.
Yeah.
And he knew it was going to be very circumstantial, and he was going to need this hearsay evidence where basically it was Kathleen and Stacy talking to others and telling them things. Well, now they're either dead and or missing. So that's where this law would come in real handy. Peterson was indicted for the murder of Kathleen Savio, and police arrested him on May 7th, 2009. And this might be a case, Gibbs, of, be careful what you wish for. Peterson had been playing around with the media. He had essentially been taunting the police through the media, saying, hey, come and get me. Well, hey, they came and got him.
Yeah, they did.
So be careful what you wish for.
Exactly.
Now, around the same time that he was indicted and arrested, a woman's body was discovered along a riverbank near his house. And that, had to have caused a big stir. The problem that the police had was in identifying the body, because it was missing a head, missing arms, and missing skin. So you're not getting any dental records because there's no head. And it makes it much tougher to get DNA due to the lack of skin. But they eventually got it, and they figured out that it was not Stacy Peterson. But Gibbs, they had to have thought that, man, we got it. This is her. We found her, but it wasn't.
I could imagine how that felt, though.
Especially waiting the however many weeks it took to get the DNA results back.
Yeah, it just would have been, the frustration level
would have been high after the fact.
Absolutely.
For sure. Now, the trial of Drew Peterson would take some time to get to. There was a lot of legal wrangling that had to go on, and a lot of it was around this Drew's Law and the statements that had been made by Kathleen and Stacy to others. The attorney spent 2 years battling over these statements made by both Kathleen and Stacy to other people, and a lot of them were about their fear of Drew Peterson. The prosecution wanted to be able to introduce these statements that would normally be considered hearsay because neither woman that made them could take the stand. But it wouldn't be until 2012 that the court ruled on what was be called Drew's Law, and they said that some of these statements could be used at trial. And that was huge to the prosecution because, like we said, they didn't have any physical evidence in their case against Drew Peterson.
And that's tough. We don't have physical evidence, man.
No, it is. I mean, when you're working on purely, circumstantial and hearsay and, no direct evidence.
Yeah. I mean, it is.
You got to work your rear end off.
It's difficult for sure.
Now, leading up to the trial, the assistant state's attorney, guy by the name of John Connor. Isn't that the guy from the Terminator?
It is.
John Connor?
John Connor.
This guy was quoted as saying, timing is everything in this trial. The trial is going to come down to whether the jurors accept the prosecutor's argument that the injury sustained by Kathleen Savio could not have been the result of fainting or of that type of fall. The prosecution was going to set out to argue that there was no way her death just weeks before this trial with Drew Peterson to settle their divorce property issues was a random act. You know that doesn't make him look good.
No, it can't make him look good.
Happens just weeks before they're getting ready to go to trial to finalize the financial portions of their divorce. Well, you know what happens if Kathleen Savio dies?
Well, of course. He gets it all.
A lot of his financial problems are solved. So what they do have is motive. They may not have physical evidence, but they definitely have motive, and they have a lot of circumstantial evidence. His trial would begin later that year, and he pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder charges. They had about 70 witnesses testify at his trial. Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow told the jury that Kathleen Savio was murdered by Drew Peterson and that he staged it to look like an accident. A former co-worker of Drew's testified on the stand that Drew Peterson offered him $25,000 to kill Kathleen. This happened just before she died. And he went on to tell the jury that Peterson told him he wanted her taken care of because she knew a secret about him that could get him kicked off the police force.
Really? $25,000?
To kill someone.
Seems low.
Very low. I don't know what hitman rates are like, but $25,000 to take someone's life. I mean, there's no amount of money. Don't get me wrong.
No, but if you're going to do it, I mean, you want to, like, if you're going to, could potentially get got and put away for life, you would think you'd want to make it worth your efforts, as wrong as that sounds. I'm just saying.
Well, we know you charge a lot more, but
yeah,
you don't have to brag about it.
Nothing under 100,000.
Gibby's got his standards. But that's the other thing I don't get. You want to have someone killed. You're just going to go up to like a coworker and say, "Hey, you want to kill my wife for $25,000?
Yeah. Can you do it for me? I know you need a new car.
I give you $25,000.
Give me $25,000. I'll leave the front door unlocked."
You are taking a hell of a chance.
Yes. Yeah, you don't know if he's going to turn you in right away.
Now this guy didn't. He didn't go to police.
Maybe he just thought he was kooky, man. Like,
yeah. But there again, Kathleen Savio had been dead for quite a while before this trial started.
Yeah.
So he had a number of years to come forward.
To think about it, and maybe he just said, I need to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Or maybe he thought, I'm the one that knows, and
if I don't say it,
I might be gone one day.
That's true, too.
So.
And the prosecution called witnesses who told the jury about incriminating statements that Kathleen and Stacy made to them. And obviously, these are the statements that were at the heart of the Drew's Law, what they were fighting about. Many of the statements centered around how scared these two women were of Drew Peterson. Stacy's pastor told jurors that she had told him that she woke up in the middle of the night and she couldn't find Drew. That he later showed up near the washing machine in their house with some women's clothing. And she said that he told her, they are going to think I did it. The defense focused on the fact that Kathleen's death was an accident. It had been ruled an accident, and the state had no physical evidence. And they said, in this case, it's been mostly relatives, investigators, and clergy on the witness stand. Drew Peterson's attorney said that, it's not going to stand up, this ruling about letting all of this hearsay evidence in. He said it's unconstitutional. And he also said, Gibbs, something that it actually kind of makes some sense. He said, the law was passed in 2008. How can it be used in the prosecution of an alleged crime that took place in 2004? I guess he's saying the law wasn't on the books when the crime happened.
So how can you?
But how can you let it in? But obviously the judge didn't agree.
Ex post facto.
You just wanted to say ex post facto?
I did.
I'm shocked that you know that. It's awesome.
There you go.
The defense presented their own pathologist who said that Kathleen Savio's death was an accident. And again, they put up legal analysts arguing that the hearsay evidence in the trial was like finding a defendant guilty before a trial even begins. they did focus a lot on the hearsay evidence because it was damaging, right? You had a lot of people saying that Kathleen and Stacy told them bad things about Drew Peterson. So in all, Gibbs, it was about 6 weeks of testimony. The jury deliberated for 2 days before convicting Drew Peterson of the murder of Kathleen Savio. And he received a 38-year prison sentence.
38.
38. Kind of a weird number.
It is a weird number.
Why not 40? Just let's round. Can we not round up and make it an even number? I like it. I like it like that.
Well, 38 is an even number.
It is. You're right.
I
I caught myself afterwards, but I was like, is Gibby going to catch that?
Yeah.
And he did. But what really got me was, so you know when the convicted person gets to get up and talk, I guess Drew Peterson just made disparaging remarks about everyone. And it wasn't just, you know, the prosecutors that put him away. I mean, he was bad-mouthing the Savio family. At one point he said, I did not kill Kathleen. To which Kathleen's sister Sue jumped up and said, you're a liar. Yes, you did. And I guess one of Kathleen's brothers got kicked out of the courtroom. He just couldn't contain himself.
Yeah, it'd be tough.
From yelling at Drew Peterson. I think you and I would have a hard time, too, being in that situation. Peterson said something directly to James Glasgow, the guy that essentially put him away. And this is going to be very important for something that happens later on. But he said, quote, all aspects of my life have been destroyed. Everything from my personal life to my professional life to my social life. And I tell you this to give you greater cause for celebration when you celebrate the fact that you perpetrated the largest railroad job in the history of this country. As soon as I get a chance, I'm going to get a tattoo on my back from shoulder to shoulder that says, no good deed goes unpunished. I found that interesting.
I think it's...
I would have liked to have been in the courtroom for that.
It's not what you typically hear in a courtroom.
Well, he's worried about his social life, for sure.
Absolutely.
Because he probably has a bunch of other 20-year-olds lined up that he wants to get engaged to, he wants to get married to. It's going to be harder for him in prison. Not saying he can't pull it off, but...
It's going to be difficult.
It's going to make it more difficult. So he goes on this rant, and after it's over, Glasgow, at one point he says, is he done? I've never seen a more pathetic display than today. So that's what the state attorney says.
Yeah.
Now, jurors would later say that it was the testimony from the witnesses that had heard information directly from Kathleen and Stacy that was the most convincing. I mean, I think, Gibbs, that's the reason that they convicted Drew Peterson. They came out and said it. But prosecutors didn't move forward with charging Peterson with the murder of Stacy. In large part, I think, Gibbs, because they didn't have her body.
It's the tough part.
And sometimes that is very tough, to charge someone for murder without having the body. It's not impossible. Authorities believe, however, that Peterson killed Stacy while she was asleep in bed, and then he moved her body and disposed of it in an effort to cover it up. Peterson's mother died in 2012, and they actually let him out of the Will County Jail. They gave him a furlough to attend his mother's funeral. You think that's normal, Gibbs?
No, you don't.
For a convicted killer.
You don't see it typically, so I'm surprised.
Yeah, that's why I thought it was interesting to point out. I don't know how often it happens. I mean, I could see if you're in there for a lesser crime, but
that I don't. Yeah.
Convicted of murder, I don't know how many furloughs they're giving, but I mean, it was his mother's funeral.
Well, hey, they didn't let Luke out. Cool Hand Luke.
Always with the cool hand Luke.
I'm just saying.
That's because he was always eating those damn eggs.
Well, you know,
there's too many eggs.
Those good eggs, man.
But it's not over for Peterson yet. He begins to fight to overturn his conviction. Without much success, an appellate court upheld the conviction in 2015. But even as he's going through the appeal process, he's scheming the whole time. So he hatched a plan to murder the state attorney who put him away. And apparently he went to an inmate at the Menard Correctional Center where he was being held, And he tried to get this guy to get one of his relatives on the outside to murder State Attorney James Glasgow. So again, you just walk up to somebody, whether it's at work or at prison, and say, hey, you know what, will you murder this person for me?
Yeah, we'll try it at work. Let's see how it goes.
So it didn't work. $25,000 for a guy that he worked with. Apparently, he promised this guy's family that he would get a bunch of money to them. The inmate, it was a man named Antonio Beast Smith.
Ooh.
So you're dealing with the Beast.
Anytime there's middle names, the nickname the Beast.
You know what happens? You mess with the bull, you get the horns.
You got a beast, you better strike first, man. It's the only way you would get respect. Strike first.
But this guy, he's not playing around. He goes right to the authorities. And he begins working with them to nail Drew Peterson by recording his conversations that he has with him. So Peterson ends up getting charged with solicitation for murder, and he goes on trial. And the Beast testified against Peterson at the trial. And he also said that Drew Peterson confessed to him that he murdered his fourth wife, Stacy. It took the jury about an hour to find Peterson guilty, and he was sentenced to an additional 40 years in prison.
40. Got your 40.
I like it much better than 38.
Well,
it just sounds right.
Now it's 78, right?
Now it's 78. So in September of last year, the Illinois Supreme Court upheld Peterson's conviction for the murder of Kathleen Savio. And just in January of this year, so I mean, things have been happening very recently, they declined to rehear his appeal. And he's appealed on a bunch of different grounds. That the trial court should not have allowed those witnesses to testify. That, Stacy Peterson told them Drew was involved in Kathleen's death. He also argued ineffective counsel, which that's almost a given, right? Almost every appeal we talk about at some point ends up with ineffective counsel. But he had a top-notch legal team. His argument centered around the fact that his legal team allowed a divorce attorney to testify that Stacy Peterson asked him whether she could use her knowledge of Drew's involvement in the murder against him in divorce proceedings. So again, it's another person that testified at trial about what Stacy Peterson told him. And this was that Drew Peterson killed Kathleen Savio. She knew it, and she wanted to know if she could use it against him in divorce. So I guess, Gibbs, you got to fight, right? You got to appeal. What else are you going to do? What else do you have to do?
Well, you're always going to do that. You're going to, run out every option, right? You're not going to want to stay in prison for 78 years.
Well, but he's really only trying to get rid of the 38, right? He's not getting out of that 40 years. He tried to have that state's attorney killed. So even if he gets out of the 38,
he still has to deal with the other.
He's got to deal with the 40, and chances are he would never get out of prison. I'm not saying you don't try. You got to try. Now we have to talk about Drew's son, Stephen. So he had a number of kids, right? He had multiple kids with multiple women. His son, Stephen, was also a cop, but he was fired in 2011 after it was determined that his actions back in 2007 hampered police investigation into his father. The people that investigated this, they said that, during that time frame, he gave contradictory testimony and that he failed to disclose important information. And overall, he used very poor judgment. For one thing, he didn't tell investigators that his father gave him $236,000 in uncashed checks just after Stacy disappeared. Authorities also said that he took some weapons from his father just before police searched his house, Drew's house. Now, Stephen filed a $10 million lawsuit in 2012 against the Oak Brook PD that fired him. His marriage failed. He ended up moving into the house in Bolingbrook that Drew and Stacy shared. And he looked after Drew's kids, his, siblings, or at least his half siblings. I should probably say it that way. Because, a couple of these kids, Drew and Stacy had together. A couple of these Drew had with Kathleen Savio, and, his son Steven's looking after all four of them. But he lost his job. But what he lived off of was Drew's pension payments. Because in a weird, I don't even know what's the word, Gibbs, decision, somebody decided that the pension payments should continue up until 2017. That's when they ran out. But a lot of people, I think, thought that was strange, that Drew's pension would be paid out. But it's ironic because it's around the time that the pension payments stopped that Stephen began telling the media that he believed his father probably killed Kathleen Savio and Stacy as well. Stephen was quoted as saying, "Over time, you hear enough from police. They can't all be full of shit. I don't want to come out and say it, but I'm sure he did it." In 2012, there was a Lifetime movie made, and they got Rob Lowe to play Drew Peterson. So Rico Suave.
Rico Suave.
Now, Drew Peterson remains the sole suspect in the disappearance of his wife, Stacy, which is still an active investigation. But to date, they've not had enough evidence to charge him, or anyone else for that matter. He is technically eligible for parole in 2081, but would at that point, Gibbs, be about 127 years old?
I would think so, right?
Yeah, so the guy's pulled off a lot of things, but living to 127, I don't think that's going to be one of them.
I don't think so either.
I mean, he might have had some good luck here and there, a little bit of bad luck. He's not going to live to be 127 years old.
No.
And the other thing is, with this disappearance of Stacy hanging over his head, they're not going to go out of their way to reduce anything for him. If anything, I would think if something got overturned on appeal, they would make sure that the other one, the 40-year, ran for the entire time.
I would think.
And then last, I want to talk a little bit about Stacy's sister. We mentioned her, Cassandra. She's been very active in the search for her sister. But she believes that she knows where her body is. And she thinks it's in the Sanitarian Ship Canal, which I talked about, earlier on in the podcast. She just thinks that divers missed it when they searched there after Stacy went missing. And there was a lot of stuff online, now there was a lot of stuff from some not so reputable places like the National Enquirer and some of that. But, there was some stuff out there that they're still searching. They've got some scans that they think are promising. So there's a chance. There's
always a chance, for sure,
that they could find her. I just saw in the news, I don't know, yesterday, today, I don't know when it was, that Lake Tahoe, they recovered a guy from 1,000 feet down.
Really?
Found him. I don't know how long he'd been missing, but he went overboard. And they found him at the bottom of Lake Tahoe at 1,000 feet.
Wow.
Using whatever technology.
Some type of sonar.
Sonar and a sub or something, I don't know. But it's possible, right? It's possible that they are going to find her eventually. Now, the question is, would they try him for the murder? Knowing that at this point right now, he's most likely never getting out. He's going to die in prison. Would they try him for the murder of Stacy? And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I don't know if they would either.
That's one of those things that you and I talk about every now and then. It's a decision that comes down to the family, but a lot of times it comes down to money.
Yeah.
But that's it. That is the story of Drew Peterson.
It's a good one.
I like the story. I hate the man. I think he's just an all-around bad guy. I'm sure he had his moments like everybody does, but I don't know. Go back to the clips some of the clips we played. I just didn't get the feeling at all like he was genuine. I felt like he was putting on a show. I didn't get the warm and fuzzies from this guy at all.
No.
And it's probably a good thing, because if I did, that would mean my radar is severely damaged.
Messed up.
It's messed up.
Messed up, man.
Repair.
Messed up radar.
All right, Gibbs, we got some voicemails. You want to do those?
Let's do them.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Natasha. I wanted to call and give a shout out to my wonderful boyfriend, Jeff Bilecki. It's his birthday on Tuesday, and we are both huge fans of the show. So, happy birthday, Jeffrey. Surprise. Thanks, guys. Have a good one, and keep your own time ticking.
So, great voicemail from Natasha, and Patreon supporter, and her and Jeff are huge fans of the show.
Well, happy birthday, man.
Yeah, so we wanted to play that and then give our own birthday wishes to Jeff, and it'll be a couple days before his actual birthday, but happy birthday.
Absolutely.
Hey, Fergalicious. I just wanted to thank you for at least posting the information on how to log into PayPal. This is Joe from Chicago. I just dropped you a smooth 20, and I want you to get yourself some beef jerky and give you a new pull-up bar. But it just thanks again, and the show is fantastic, of course. And I just want to let you know I'm a mailman in the suburbs of Chicago, and I'm laughing and making faces at all the horrible things I'm hearing, and people probably think that I am more crazy than the average mailman, which is pretty crazy. But I'm on my route taking a break, and I just had to call you. I love you guys. Have a good one. And TikTok.
All right, we love you too. We think you're better than the average mailman by far.
Absolutely.
Number one, you're a true crime listener.
That's right.
Which you automatically get cool points for that. And then, the support on PayPal, there's some cool points there. We appreciate that.
Hey guys, my name's Tim. I'm from Seattle, and I'm mid-50s, and so I was raised with the whole Ted Bundy thing. My mom got into it early on. She called it when Ted got arrested the first time on the local news. She's like, okay, that's the guy. That's Ted. The bushy-haired stranger. That's Ted. Anyway, so she got me going on true crime books. We read. I don't know. I was 10 years old. Not a good idea, but I ended up reading Helter Skelter in cold blood. And then meanwhile, my mom is throwing me in on all this Ted stuff. Where she's like, okay, he's the guy. Anyway, I've been searching for a good true crime podcast, and I love Sword and Scale, but you guys are a completely different animal for true crime podcast, and I love the humor, I love the banter, I love all of it, and just speaking from it's sort of an OG true crime guy, going back to the 70s in Seattle. In fact, one time my good friend of mine was jogging near where one of the Green River victims was found, and the cops kind of stopped and looked at him. So yeah, that's my personal, encounter with the Green River Killer through a friend, surrogate-wise. Anyway, love what you do. Keep it going. I think I'm going to go Patreon today. So thanks a lot, and keep your own time ticking.
All right. Appreciate that voicemail from Tim. He said he was in his mid-50s, Gibbs. He sounded like he was about 21.
Mid-50s is the new 21.
It is. He
Just
has
saying.
A very young-sounding voice.
Just like me.
Yeah, you do sound
youthful.
Younger than what you really are. You sound about 55.
Oh, that hurts, man. That hurts. That hurts bad.
Couldn't help it, man. I can't resist it.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Casey from Kentucky. I love listening to your all podcasts while I'm at work, and I'll be looking forward to listening to them all the way to our vacation in southern Maine. I absolutely love you guys. I love all the cases, not so much the crimes themselves, but I love how you all go into depth and explain what's going on. And I think it's also hilarious that it terrifies my boyfriend that I love listening to you guys so much, which makes it even better. But please keep it up, and please keep the podcast coming. Thanks.
All right, great voicemail. We'll keep them coming, Gibbs, as long as people keep listening.
Keep listening. Keep telling your friends and family. It's kind of like Sprint, friends and family.
Tell your friends and family. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So I always get a kick out of, so you've got a spouse or a significant other. One loves true crime. The other one doesn't understand it. The one that doesn't understand it is oftentimes just a little bit fearful of the one that is really into true crime. And I think that's natural because you're learning a lot from the podcasts and the shows, and you cheat on me, and I cut your tallywhacker off, and I know how to do it, and I know how to get away with
Tallywhacker.
it. Yeah, I went with tallywhacker.
Tallywhacker.
I haven't used that one in a while.
Tallywhacker.
Or I'll glue it to the side of your leg.
That's a lot of glue.
That's a good comeback.
Hey guys, my name is Ethan. I live in Houston, Texas, and I started listening to the show on July 4th of this year, and just now finished an episode you released on Sunday. I listened to all of them in a row and started at number 1 and went through all of them. And man, what a great time. I clean pools in and around Houston, and it's been a long, hot summer, and you guys brought me loads of entertainment, so I really appreciate it. My favorite podcast right now by far. I'm going to go start the True Crime All the Time Unsolved as soon as this is done. My brother Jerry turned me on to you, and I'm so glad he did. I have a quick suggestion. I think, Ferguson, you're a hunter, so maybe this would be right up your alley, but the Hmong guy, I think it was in Wisconsin, that killed the hunters. I'm not real familiar with the story, and I've looked it up on other podcasts. I've never heard another podcast about it, so I thought that might be something you guys could do, and I really appreciate the podcast. I am Team Gibby and Team Fergie, so stay safe and keep your own time ticking. Thanks, guys.
All right. We appreciate the kind words, don't we, Gibbs?
We always do.
We always do. I am actually not a hunter. I'm a shooter. I love to shoot guns and have shot competitively over the years, but I don't actually hunt. I've never actually...
That we talk about.
...harmed another animal.
We do the human hunt.
You do not hunt humans, Gibby. How many times have I told you this?
You're right. I'm sorry. I never said that.
All right.
Delete.
All right, let's dip into the mailbag real quick.
All right.
Allison Porter sent me a couple chips from Georgia, which is awesome. Kirsten from Scotland sent us a whole bunch of stuff. Curly Whirly bars, some other confectionery delights.
Oh, tons of them, man.
Which is awesome. And then got to give a huge shout out to David Truitt from Killer Pens.
Oh, man. Awesome.
He was saying he was going to send us some pins, and I was like, I don't know what they're going to be like. They show up and they blow me away. They have the logo. They've got a picture of, mine has a picture of me. Yours has a picture of you.
Yeah.
Shrunk down. You can barely tell, but you can see it's us.
Right.
I'm real buff in mine, which is sweet.
Yeah. I noticed that.
Yeah.
Potential.
There's potential there. It's how I want to look. And then they write like a dream. So, yeah, check out Killer Pens, killerpens.com. Probably easier to find him on Facebook, Killer Pens. But thanks, David, man. We appreciate that a lot. And I've been using mine all the time. All right, Gibbs, that is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time. We're getting ready for the hundo.
Yes.
Big hundo. And I mentioned that I had an idea. And I don't want to give it away. You said I already have, but I've been thinking about mind hunters. We've done some of the killers that were featured in that first season, but there's some left to do. And I was thinking maybe we could string some together. That's my idea.
I like it.
So get ready for that.
Be ready.
All right, everyone. We love you. We appreciate you. Subscribe. Give us a rating if you want. Tell your friends. But
your
just
mom,
keep listening.
your dad. Call your grandparents up.
And say, hey.
If your kids are almost 18, get them hooked now.
They're almost 18.
Yeah.
All right. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time. So for Mike.
And Gibby.
Stay safe and keep your own time ticking.